Hey everybody, this is Jason. This is Jay's Project Garage. I don't know if you watched the last video, the tail end of it, but I kind of alluded to what I'm planning on doing this weekend. I got a whole bunch of stuff to get done. And the best thing that I'm going to be doing is getting those damn chickens out of my shop. So I don't have to listen to them anymore. I'm sure they're annoying the hell out of you guys. So today I think I'm going to put the vacuum actuator and the hub bearing in my truck. I'm going to get started on the torque boxes and stuff in the 69. I'll bring you guys along for that. I don't know if you want to watch me do the stuff on my truck. I mean, there's already a million videos on hub bearing replacement. So it's 8:30 Saturday morning. Got the whole weekend to get all my stuff done. I got projects to do on the house. I got some more OSB to put on the outside, and I'm getting ready, like I said in my last video, I'm getting ready to bury the power from the house to the pole across the road and from the house to the shop. I don't know if you guys want to learn any electrical stuff, but I mean, I can video that too, I guess. Let's see what else I got to do. I got to mow. Got to sharpen the blades on the mower. I don't know. There's a ton of stuff to do, so I'll just bring you guys along, and I don't know, maybe we'll have a good weekend. So before we get into the lame action, I was getting the parts out from my truck and realized how much of a disaster my shop is. So I got to go through and I got to do some cleaning. I got to get my tools put away and reorganized. And but as I was pulling the parts out, I was looking at the receipts. The hub bearing was $221. The actuator, I think, was $165. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago. Parts were pretty reasonable. I mean, the average Joe could just fix his car instead of going and buying a new one. It's like they're trying to kill the little guy. Inflation is just getting stupid. Classic car prices through the roof, used car prices through the roof, new car prices through the roof if you can even get one. It's just, I don't know. We'll talk about that more as the video goes along. I don't know if you can hear the music in the background. Better go turn that down so I don't get demonetized. Ha! So I've been in here hacking and whacking. Yeah. Anyway, I started getting the torque box and everything cut out, and you can see how bad the frame rail is. That's why we're going through all this. I'm going to make a piece and I'm just going to patch this in, and then I've already showed you in another video how I'm going to patch the other side. Okay, quick history lesson. Let's go way back to the 1950s. Mid-1950s, pretty much everything was body on frame. So you had a full frame, there's a bunch of different designs, and the body bolted down to it through rubber bushings. In the late 1950s, Ford started developing a new unibody car for the 1960 model year, and that was going to be the Falcon and the Comet. It was the first compact car released by the Big Three, and the only way it was available was with the little 90 horsepower 144-inch six-cylinder. By 1962, Ford would introduce their new compact Windsor V8. We'll get into that later. That's the engine that would evolve into the 302, the engine that everybody knows. Anyway, the early cars didn't have any front torque boxes at all. The only way the front frame rails tied in with the rest of the car was through the firewall and the floor pan. They had torque boxes in the rear that tied the rear frame rails in with the rockers, but nothing in the front. So if you've ever driven one of the early cars and they just feel kind of mushy, they don't feel real sure-footed, that's partially why. And the suspension would evolve, but in 1967, Ford started using the torque box in the front, but only on one side. And with suspension advancements and the addition of the second torque box in 1968, the cars started feeling more solid, more sure-footed. But now the front frame rails were tied into the rockers with torque boxes, the rockers tied into the rear rails with torque boxes, and the whole platform was more rigid. But as time goes along and I do more videos, I'll start showing and explaining how the unibody evolved into what it is today, and it is light years ahead of anything they had before. So instead of reshooting that whole last part of that video, something I'm going to add is that the little Falcon Comet would eventually evolve in mid-1964 as the car that everybody knows, the Mustang. we'll talk about more about it. We'll talk a lot more about it as time goes along. Well, we're making some headway. I'm working on the 69 right now, but I got the left hub bearing and the vacuum actuator put in the left side of my truck. Way better. Still not 100%. So told my wife, say, I'm gonna run into town real quick and go grab a vacuum actuator for the right side. And she's, oh, I need to go to Rural King and get some stuff, and I need to do this and I need to do that. Well, you know, an hour-long trip turns into 3 hours, and I've lost half my afternoon. So I'll show you the parts from the truck, the parts I took out from the truck, and then I'll show you what I've been doing on the 69. Here's the old hub bearing. It really doesn't feel that bad. I can feel it dragging just a little bit. So that wasn't really the noise I was hearing. This is the vacuum actuator. And it's basically got like a diaphragm in it. When you apply a vacuum, this moves and it locks into the half shaft. But I don't know if you guys can see it. See how that's beveled right there? That's actually not supposed to be like that. This is where it was dragging on the CV shaft. Luckily the shaft is fine, but this isn't. And this was part of the noise I was hearing, was this thing just, it's like almost like a weird clicky noise. And the clicky noise was the teeth trying to engage because the actuators wouldn't completely disengage. I don't know if the diaphragm in it went bad or what. The system on that truck, the way it works is there's a vacuum solenoid. When you hit the switch, it works the motor on the transfer case to engage it, and it sends a signal to the vacuum actuator or the vacuum solenoid to send vacuum to the lockouts to engage those. And for whatever reason, the diaphragms, it's kind of a common thing, but I think the diaphragms just went bad and they wouldn't completely disengage. So there was the teeth were dragging on each other, and that was the noise I was hearing. I don't know. We'll try to fix it. Okay, so I've started cutting the outer part of the frame rail off so I can get it patched. The piece I have is only 3 inches wide, so I'm going to have to put another section in here. I'm actually going to wind up going a lot higher. That's no big deal. But you can see right here the holes. This is that underfloor support from the back side that I showed you a couple videos ago. When I cut it out, I said it was going to be a disaster behind it. Well, there's the proof. I had all that scale stuff on. It was really kind of hard to tell how bad it was, so I got in here and started using a Sawzall and my air hammer, and all that scale fell off, and it's Swiss cheese. The bottom of the rail is completely gone. So that torque box really didn't look all that bad from the outside, but the hole inside of it was completely rotted away. Just a little pointer when you're welding. A lot of guys will tell you to start from the top and work your way down. That's fine sometimes. But when you're butt welding like this and you don't have a whole lot of a gap, if you start from the bottom and you weld up, the weld may not be as pretty. I mean, it's going to get ground off anyway, but the gravity's not pulling the puddle down on the metal that you're trying to weld, so you get way better penetration if you go uphill. All right, something else. I've got this piece pretty much welded in. You can see I got the bottoms lined up. I did grind this weld because that is right where the torque box ties into the frame rail. This one, I'm really not going to clean it up a whole lot. I'm just going to kind of dress it a little bit. If you grind it completely flat, you're taking strength away from it. It doesn't show. There really isn't any reason to make it perfect. It's okay to leave those. Same thing on plug welds. You don't want to grind them completely flat unless it's someplace that shows. You kind of want to leave a little bit of a raised nugget where the weld is. You keep grinding on it, you don't know how thick the metal is around it. You could grind all the way through the metal and wind up with a weaker spot than what it originally was with a spot weld. Just like that. You can still see the weld. All I did was flatten it out a little bit. That area is not going to affect how the torque box fits at all, so I'm just going to leave it. All I've got left to do is just to patch this little area right here. I'm actually going to go up fairly high. You can't see it on video, but I can feel it's thin all the way up into here. So I'm just going to stick a section in there. Also at the bottom, you can see how I was talking about in the other video where the two halves of the frame rail don't meet. There's actually a gap there. So all I did was come down to the same point that it was before, and I made sure that my length was good. And I know what some of you guys are thinking. You're like, Man, this guy hasn't even cut all the old stuff out yet, and he's putting new in. I like having some of the old stuff there because it's a reference. If I leave the inner part of the rail there, I know where this one needs to end, and vice versa. If I was just replacing the other side, I would leave this in so I could see the length. Also, width. I left this bottom part on so I could tell, so I could make sure that I had this in the right spot this way. Just something to think about. Ta-da! Completely welded in. Got my patch welded in. You can see I left part of the weld, and that is paper thin. You can just barely catch your fingernail on it, but I did leave some of the weld there to keep the strength. Now the next step is to go ahead and patch this inner part and get the rest of this floor support cut out. You'll notice that when I cut this, I left the back of the underfloor support, and I'm leaving the seat platform in there for now. This is my reference. When I go to put the underfloor support in, I'll know exactly where it needs to go height-wise, width-wise, and how far back, since the old one's still on there. I'm gonna go up underneath and I'm gonna mark it, and then I'll cut it out, and then I'll be able to put the new one in. I'll be able to clamp it right here, weld it in at the front, and then I can take the seat platform out and do the floor pan. Something that happened while I was welding this patch in, and you're gonna have this problem a lot on sheet metal when you go welding on it, especially on a continuous weld, you're gonna get warping. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but remember where this used to sit? Right there? This whole part right here warped. I'm not the slightest bit worried about that. When I put the underfloor support in, I'll be able to get in through the top side, and I'll be able to clamp it to bring it back out where it needs to be. Don't freak out if you get warping in your metal, because it's always fixable. Alright, so you can see I've got my new piece in. I've got the frame rail completely patched. All the rust is completely gone now. I'm mocking up my underfloor support. I've got it clamped up in the back. I marked it underneath. I put it right back where it was before. And I've just got it sitting in here. One thing that you always want to do when you're putting new sheet metal in is to make sure that you mock it up before you put it in there for good to weld it. Check and make sure that all the edges and everything are, especially on this aftermarket stuff. I mean, this could be wider, it could be longer than it originally was. Just make sure that you go through and everything's going to fit the way it needs to. Now I can go through and I can mark where the end of the frame rail is, and then I can start drilling holes for plug welds. Alright, underfloor support's all in and welded, at least at the front anyway. I've got it all clamped up at the back. I'm ready to take those clamps off and start cutting the rest of the floor out. I'm going to go ahead and put the torque box in before I do that, just to kind of get everything rigid where I don't have to worry about anything moving around. Especially since I got it cut loose from the cross member that goes from the underfloor floor support to the other side. One thing I never showed you guys is that I've got it on a jack stand here underneath the frame rail, but I put a jack stand underneath the rocker with a wedge to make sure that nothing moved while I had everything cut apart. It's really important. The only thing that would have been holding this thing together was a little bit of the transmission tunnel and a flimsy part of the firewall. So make sure you support everything really well before you start cutting it apart. One last thing before I close this video out, you'll see the silver stuff on here. You got to make sure you're using weld-through primer. Corrosion protection is really, really important. You're fixing rust. The last thing you want is for it to come back. So just do your due diligence and do everything you can to try to help prevent it in the long run. Whew, it's almost 9, I think. I'm tired. I'm not gonna lie. Didn't get anywhere near as much done today as I'd hoped. It's pretty normal. I need to have a blockbuster day tomorrow. I got a lot of stuff I need to get done. I know it's only April, but I got a lot to do this summer. And I want to get this thing painted and get it ready to go back to the guy. Like I was talking about earlier with prices on stuff. If you've never watched any of my other videos, I don't blame you, because they suck. Not that this one's any better, but I'm trying to be a little more informative, and I don't know. Hopefully hopefully I'm doing better. Anyway, I've been in the body business for a long time, and I wouldn't really call it insider information, but um, I hear a lot more rumors, and I get a lot of industry information that a lot of people don't. Common knowledge is that there's a chip shortage, so um, manufacturers can't get their cars built. They're cutting back on um, all the bells and whistles, the extra bells and whistles. Um, Try to cut back on some of the electronics just so they can get these cars built. So since there's not as many new cars in the market, that automatically drove up the price of used cars. Um, and I'm not going to get political on this channel ever. I don't want to talk about politics. Let's just say some stuff happened that I don't necessarily agree with. Now we have inflation problems, and it's affected everything all the way across the board. It's like I was talking about earlier with the new parts for my truck. You know, that hub would have been half the price 2 years ago. Same with the vacuum actuator. Used car or old cars, it's affecting them unbelievably. I mean, Barrett Jackson and all the TV shows were bad enough. You'd see where the guys in Texas were, you know, they'd go buy some used Ford, some old 60-something Ford truck, and they'd pay, you know, $5,000 for it. Well, up until then, that was a $1,500 or $2,000 truck, tops. Now all of a sudden, everybody and their brother that's got one thinks it's worth what they saw on Fast and Loud. So Barrett Jackson's been great, and it's been horrible at the same time. You know, somebody will see a 70 Mach 1 or a 69 Camaro roll across the block for $70,000, and they automatically think that theirs is worth $60,000. And it's a clapped out piece of shit 6-cylinder car. Well, it isn't. And the latest trend is, you know, a 69 or a 70 fastback has always been a pretty sought after car. Well, you used to be able to buy a pretty decent project for about $5,000. Granted, that was 15 years ago. So you adjust for inflation a little bit. Let's say a good project car is $8,000 or $10,000. Guys are wanting $15,000 to $20,000 for a car with no interior. It's a complete rust bucket. You know, the one I'm working on right now, you originally would have thought it was a pretty nice car just at quick glance, but when you start cutting it apart and see how much rust is actually in this thing, if you're going to do all the work yourself, let's say, you know, you go buy some clapped out car for $15,000 or $20,000, you've got to do the math. You'll hear guys preach all the time, well, you know, I'm just doing this because I want to save another car. Bullshit. There ain't no way you're going to lose money on a project just for the sake of saving one. You have to make sound investments. Even if you were doing it yourself, just in parts, you're going to have at least $20,000. At minimum $20,000. And I'm going to say probably more than that just in cost of restoring one of these things. If you're paying somebody else, you're going to have $40,000 or $50,000 in it. Normally labor is more than what the parts cost is. So you spent $20,000 on the car, now you got $40,000 in the restoration, and now you think the car is worth at minimum $40,000. And now you think the car is worth $60,000. No, it's not. You see them advertise for that all the time on eBay, and you'll see them go for that at Barrett Jackson. But unless you're doing a Barrett Jackson quality restoration, your car's not worth that kind of money. I'm sorry, it's just not. So just do the math. If you're looking at a project car, do the math in your head on what you think it's going to cost to restore it and double it, and then you've got a real number. I don't build cars to sell, I build them to drive and enjoy. But I don't want to be upside down in something. You know, if something happened to me, or if I fell on hard times and I had to sell it, I don't want to take a loss on a car just because I made a bad investment. So, sorry to end the video on a sour note, but it's just kind of my opinion on that. And you guys have a great evening. Get out in the shop and work on your projects. And I'll either see you tomorrow or next week.